Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that I know you're super interested in,
Oh, yeah.
and that is fluoride in our drinking water.
Oh, wow.
And, you sent in a ton of stuff for this one.
Yeah.
We got articles, we got research, we even got like some of your own notes.
Cool.
So we're going to try to unpack all of that together today, and we're going to be exploring kind of like the potential benefits and then also some of those controversial risks that people talk about.
Right.
And we're going to look at it through the lens of how it plays out specifically here in the UK,
Right.
which is where we both are.
Right.
So, I mean,
It's interesting because this debate has been going on for
yeah,
like over 60 years now.
I know.
And people still get so fired up about it on both sides.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those topics that people have really strong opinions about.
Totally.
And I know, in fact, you flagged for me that like there have been over 100 lawsuits just in the U.S.
Just in the U.S. about it.
about this. But before we kind of get into all that stuff, let's take a step back for a second. And
Right.
can you just give us kind of a refresher on like what actually is fluoride and where do we encounter it like in our daily lives?
Absolutely. So fluoride is a naturally occurring mineral,
Okay.
and you find it in rocks. And as water flows over those rocks,
Okay.
it picks up the fluoride.
Got it.
So it ends up in our water sources.
Makes sense.
And even in some of the food we eat,
Oh, really?
like tea, for example.
Oh, like that article you sent me.
Exactly, like, that a single cup of tea
Uh-huh.
can have quite a bit of fluoride in it.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that tea had like all sorts of different compounds and stuff in it, but I never really thought about fluoride.
It's the soil, the tea plants are really good at absorbing fluoride from the ground,
Oh, interesting.
which is why it often has higher levels than other drinks.
Okay.
But yeah, whether it's from tea water or certain foods, all that fluoride ends up in our bodies.
Okay, so that brings us to like the big question then, why is there so much fuss about fluoride?
Yeah.
Especially in terms of our teeth.
So fluoride's really important for making our tooth enamel stronger.
Okay.
And tooth enamel is like the protective shield for your teeth.
Uh-huh.
And fluoride kind of helps to make that shield tougher
Right.
and more resistant to acid attacks from bacteria.
So it's like giving our teeth armor to fight off all the sugar bugs.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that focus on dental health is actually what led to the idea of putting fluoride in the public water supply
Right, back in like
back in 1945.
1945.
It all started in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grand Rapids, the pioneers of water fluoridation.
Exactly.
But why did they decide to do that? Like, were cavities really that much of a problem back then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Like, researchers at the time had seen that people who lived in areas that had naturally higher levels of fluoride in their water
Right.
had way fewer cavities. So the thinking was, if we could replicate that in other places where fluoride levels were lower, it could really improve people's dental health,
Okay.
and especially in areas where maybe it's harder to get regular dental care.
So it's kind of like a way to level the playing field a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay, and I mean, from what I've read, that idea really took off.
It,
Not just in the U.S., but like globally as well.
yeah, the World Health Organization estimates that something like 450 million people around the world
Wow.
either get artificially fluoridated water or they live in areas where it's naturally high.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
It is.
Okay, so we've got millions of people drinking fluoridated water.
Right.
But one thing I was wondering is like, is there an ideal amount? Like, is there a Goldilocks zone? Like, not too much, not too little?
That's a great question. And that leads us to, I think, one of the key points for this deep dive,
Okay.
which is finding that balance between the good stuff
Right, yeah.
and the potential risks of fluoride.
Okay.
So the WHO recommends a maximum of 1.5 milligrams of fluoride per liter of water.
Okay, so there is a limit,
There is.
but why is 1.5 like the magic number?
So this level is thought to kind of maximize the good effects on dental health,
Uh-huh.
but minimize the risk of two conditions you can get
Okay.
from having too much fluoride:
And those are,
dental and skeletal fluorosis.
whenever I hear those words, I always get a little bit nervous.
Sure.
Can you just break those down for me? Like, what actually are they?
Yeah, so dental fluorosis, which is much more common,
Okay.
it's basically a cosmetic change to the teeth.
Okay.
It happens when the tooth is developing,
Uh-huh.
and it can cause like white spots or streaks on the enamel.
Okay.
Skeletal fluorosis is much rarer,
Right.
and that affects the bones,
Okay.
and it can cause like joint pain and stiffness.
Oh, gosh.
But it's important to say that, both of these things are linked to very high levels of fluoride
Right.
over a long period.
Okay.
It's not just like one cup of tea.
Right.
You're going to be fine.
So it sounds like it's all about kind of finding that sweet spot,
Yeah.
like get enough to protect your teeth, but not so much that it causes problems later on.
Exactly.
Okay. But as you mentioned earlier, this whole issue of fluoride in the water, it's not without its critics,
No, it's very controversial,
especially in the US.
especially in the U.S.
Where you flagged all those lawsuits for me?
Right. There's a growing movement, especially over there,
Oh,
that wants to take fluoride out of the public water systems.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Groups like the Fluoride Action Network, which you had in your notes,
Uh-huh.
they argue that water fluoridation is unnecessary
Okay.
and that it could be harmful.
Right. And then there's that big report from the US government.
Oh, yeah. In 2023,
Yeah.
that linked high levels of fluoride in drinking water to kids having lower IQs.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal when that came out.
It was a big deal. It got everyone talking.
Any day.
And that report looked at a bunch of research, including a 2019 study in JAMO Pediatrics,
Right.
which found that there was a possible link between fluoride exposure during pregnancy
Uh-huh.
and slightly lower IQ scores in young children.
Wow. So it wasn't just talk either. Like that report led to some actual action.
Oh, yeah.
I remember a federal judge in California ordered the EPA to like reevaluate its regulations
It did.
on fluoride levels.
Yeah, he cited the potential risks in that report
Right.
and said that the EPA needs to tighten up its rules around fluoridation.
Right. I mean, it's important to point out though that the judge didn't like definitively say
He didn't say
that fluoridated water is like
is dangerous to public health,
right endangering public health.
but he did acknowledge that there's a potential risk.
Right, which is still a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got this really complex situation in the US
Right.
where like the benefits of fluoride are kind of being weighed up against the potential risks,
Yeah.
especially in light of that new report.
Right.
So how does all of this play out here in the UK
Yeah.
where you and I are?
Yeah.
I know that the UK government has been talking about maybe expanding water fluoridation programs.
They have. Yeah, you're right. And it's interesting because it kind of seems to clash a bit
Okay.
with the findings of a big UK review.
Oh, the one that I sent you.
Exactly that one you flagged,
Okay.
which looked at over 150 studies.
Wow.
And they suggested that the effect of water fluoridation on tooth decay has actually gone down
Oh, really?
since we all started using fluoride toothpaste.
So you're telling me that with like most people brushing with fluoride toothpaste,
Right.
the added benefit of fluoride in the water is like negligible?
Well, the review used the word modest
Modest.
to describe the benefit.
Okay, so what does that actually mean?
To give you an idea of how things have changed,
Mm-hmm.
fluoridation used to reduce the number of decayed, missing, or filled teeth in children by an average of 2 whole teeth.
Wow.
That's gone down now to about a quarter of a tooth.
Wow, a quarter of a tooth.
Yeah,
That is quite a difference.
it is.
I remember reading a quote from Professor Anne-Marie Glennie,
Yes.
who was one of the researchers involved in that review, and she
Okay.
pointed out that even this modest benefit, it might take years to actually see it.
Exactly.
Like years to materialize.
And that brings up a really important question for you.
Okay.
Does this new evidence,
Mhm.
especially from this UK review,
Right.
change how you feel about water fluoridation?
Yeah.
Especially since you live in a country where everyone uses fluoride toothpaste.
It definitely makes me kind of pause and think about the bigger picture a little bit.
Yeah.
For
And
me.
it gets even more complicated when you bring in politics.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we talked
Yeah.
to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Right. And his views on fluoride.
He wants to ban it completely.
Yeah. He called it industrial waste
He did.
and said it was linked to all sorts of health issues.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, when Donald Trump said he was open to the idea of banning fluoride,
Oh, yeah, that was a moment.
that was a moment for sure.
But it's important to say that,
Mhm.
you know, although RFK Jr.'s views have gotten a lot of attention,
Right.
the science isn't really there to support a direct link
Okay.
between fluoride and those specific conditions he's talking about.
Got it.
It's still inconclusive.
Okay. And I also remember you pointing out in your notes that like the decision to add or remove fluoride
Right.
from water supplies in the US.
It's not a federal decision.
Right. It's all
It's the states and local authorities.
right. So even if there was like a big push,
It wouldn't be a simple thing
we
to
don't
do.
want
there.
like a straightforward thing.
No,
Okay. So it seems like there are a lot of different moving parts here,
a lot of moving parts.
both scientifically and politically.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think what I'm most interested in is like, what do the experts
What do the experts think?
in the field have to say? And
Right.
there were some really insightful perspectives.
There were some really good ones.
in the stuff that you sent me?
We've got some fascinating viewpoints coming up.
Okay.
I think you'll find them interesting.
Great.
I think they'll get you thinking, for
Yeah.
sure. One of the experts you had highlighted was Professor Stephen Peckham.
Okay.
He's a health policy expert.
Right.
And he says that while fluoride can definitely be good for your teeth, it's not essential,
Okay.
especially when you're talking about getting it from water.
That's interesting because, like, I feel like there's been so much emphasis on that over the years.
There has, yeah.
Yeah.
But his argument is that we have much better ways of doing it now,
Okay.
like fluoride toothpaste,
Right.
which delivers the fluoride straight to your teeth,
Okay.
where it needs to be.
Makes sense.
He seems particularly worried about the potential effects on the brain
Right.
of too much fluoride.
Especially for pregnant women.
Yeah, especially for pregnant women.
He's, like, urging a lot of caution there.
Yeah, he's definitely saying we need to be careful and really weigh up the risks and benefits,
Right.
even if the risks are thought to be quite low.
Okay, so then contrast that with someone like Dr. Kunal Patel, who's a dentist
Yes.
who has worked both privately and within the NHS.
Yeah.
I remember you sent over this article about him talking about how his views on fluoridation have actually changed.
He's had a real change of heart.
Yeah. What caused that?
It seems like there are two main things.
Okay.
One is the new evidence.
Okay, like the stuff showing that the impact of water fluoridation has gone down.
Exactly, since everyone's using fluoride toothpaste.
Right.
And then also he's just more concerned about the risks now.
Okay, so even if they're statistically small, he's like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, he's taking a much more cautious approach now.
Oh, okay.
He's saying instead of just like a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, just putting it in everyone's water.
Exactly. He thinks we should be doing more targeted stuff.
Okay.
So focusing on particular communities
Okay.
or groups of people.
So like areas where people maybe don't have as much access.
Maybe they don't have good access to dental care.
Right.
Or they're not using fluoride toothpaste.
Right. Okay. So it's all about being a bit more nuanced
It's about being more nuanced.
and taking into account all those other factors.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And it brings us back to what's happening here in the UK.
Right.
Remember we said that only about 10% of people in England
Yeah.
actually get fluoridated water.
Right. And like most of that is in the West Midlands
Yeah. And the Northeast.
and the Northeast.
Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland don't have any at all.
Right. None at all.
So it's a real mix, isn't
It's
it?
a real patchwork. Yeah.
You've got all these different regions doing different things.
Hmm.
And then you've got the science, the public opinion,
Right.
the fact that everyone's using fluoride toothpaste.
It's a lot for policymakers to think about.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It really is. And
Right.
it brings up some really interesting questions for you to think about. Imagine you're in charge of public health
Oh, wow.
in the UK.
Okay.
Knowing everything we've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do about fluoride?
Oh, that is a tough one.
Would you go for nationwide water fluoridation?
Right.
Would you stick with just doing targeted programs?
Right.
Or would you try something completely different?
I mean, it's a tough call, isn't it?
It is.
Because on the one hand, you could really help people's dental health.
Yeah, especially in those communities where they don't have access to dentists
Exactly.
or fluoride toothpaste.
But then on the other hand, there are those questions about the risks
The risks.
and the fact that the evidence is always changing.
It is.
And like ethically, is it right?
Yeah, is it right to add something to the water?
Even if it's supposed to be good for you.
Even if you're trying to do something good?
Right.
It's tricky.
Yeah. It really highlights all the things that policymakers have to think about
It really does.
when they're making these decisions.
And it's not always easy, is it?
No, there's rarely a straightforward solution.
No,
Yeah. And there are always going to be those trade-offs
always.
to consider.
Yeah.
Well, this has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Good. I'm glad.
It's amazing how, like, a seemingly simple question about fluoride
Right.
can turn into...
It's such a complicated discussion.
Yeah, such a nuanced discussion.
It's a reminder that even though we have all this information at our fingertips,
Mm-hmm.
there's always more to learn
Right.
and more viewpoints to think about.
Well said.
So as we wrap this up,
Yeah.
what are your big takeaways for our listener today?
I mean, I think the biggest one is that this is not a black and white issue.
It's not.
There are good arguments on both sides.
Yeah.
The science is still developing.
It's always developing, yeah,
And what's the best approach is probably going to be different depending on where you are
depending on the situation, yeah,
and who you are.
for sure.
So I guess it all comes down to staying informed,
Staying informed, yeah.
being critical of the information that you come across, and really weighing up those benefits and risks for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask questions and
Yeah.
have these conversations.
That's what the deep dive is all about.
That is what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you some valuable insights
I hope so.
and maybe even spark some conversations of your own.
Yeah, maybe even inspired you to do a bit more research yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, until next time.
See you later.
It's kind of wild to think about how much, like, our understanding of fluoride has changed
I know.
over the years. Like,
Yeah.
it went from this simple solution to, like,
Yeah.
a really big problem everyone had
Yeah.
to now it's, like, so much more nuanced.
Right.
As we've gotten more knowledge, more technology.
Yeah. It really shows you that science is always changing.
Right.
What we thought we knew even like a few decades ago
Yeah.
might be totally different now.
Totally. I mean, like, we have so many more ways of dealing with dental health now.
Yeah.
Like fluoride toothpaste, which has been huge.
Hugely impactful. Yeah. Globally.
Yeah, but then that
Yeah.
makes you wonder, like, okay,
Yeah.
how do all these new tools fit into the bigger picture?
Right. It's like we added a new piece to the puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
but now the whole puzzle looks different.
Yeah, I mean, like, thinking back to that UK review,
Yeah.
it really does challenge, like, all those assumptions about water fluoridation.
It does.
I mean, it basically suggests that, like, in a place like the UK where most people use fluoride toothpaste anyway,
right.
the added benefit of having it in the water might not be that big.
Might be tiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really makes you think.
Yeah, it puts policymakers in this tricky spot.
It does.
Do they stick with this, like, one-size-fits-all approach,
Hmm.
even though we know now that the impact might not be as big?
Right.
Or do we start thinking about more targeted strategies,
Right.
focus on certain communities,
Yeah.
certain types of people?
Makes sense.
It's almost philosophical, isn't it?
It is a bit.
Like, are we willing to accept a small risk for, like, a potential collective benefit?
Mm.
Or do we prioritize individual choice?
Right.
Even if it means maybe missing out on some public health measure.
Big questions.
Big questions, yeah, and not easy to answer.
Not at all.
I mean, there are definitely valid points on both sides.
For sure.
So what do you think is, like, the most important thing to consider when you're
Yeah.
making these public health decisions?
It's tough.
Is it the science? Is it the ethics?
I don't think there's one thing.
Or even the money?
Yeah, the cost.
Yeah.
I think it's about trying to get the balance right.
Right.
You need good science
Mhm.
to back up your decisions.
Yeah.
But you can't ignore the ethics,
Right.
how it affects people's freedom,
Mhm.
and how much it's all going to cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's complicated.
It's all about acknowledging that complexity,
Yeah.
right? And not falling for simple solutions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no one size fits all.
Right. What works in one place might not work somewhere else.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has. Into the world of fluoride.
It really has.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, just dipped our toes in.
But we've covered so much.
We have
The history, the science, the benefits,
the
risks,
risks,
the politics.
even the philosophy.
Yeah, even the philosophy.
It affects so many parts of our lives,
Yeah, it really does.
doesn't it?
So as we wrap up this exploration,
Okay.
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, go for it.
If you're curious to learn even more
Mm-hmm.
about fluoride, there's a ton of stuff out there online.
Oh, yeah.
Go and do your own research.
Yeah, look into those studies.
Read different perspectives.
Yeah, and form your own opinion.
That's the beauty of knowledge, right?
That's it.
It helps us make informed decisions.
About our own health and well-being.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep asking questions.
Keep diving deeper.
Keep diving deeper until next time.
See you later.